Hello, welcome to episode 14 of the Old Glory Games podcast. My name is Kyle, and if you have been following along, you know that this is actually going to be part 2 of our Bubba Wallace disaster episode, which we had to break up into 2 parts. And so this is why I'm doing this introduction, to kind of do that for you and give you the right context. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Greg is going to continue on talking about Bubba Wallace and his whole thing about how he was using his skin tone to get certain advantages. If you missed the first part, go back to our podcast and check out episode number, I think that will be 12. And episode 13, we took a break there on a live stream to talk about the incident with Harrison Butker, the Kansas City Chief kicker, who got into trouble for, I don't know why, but that was part of a live stream. If you missed that, check out that as well in the video section, the live video section of the YouTube channel for The Conservative Take. And lastly, if you have any questions, why don't you put those into the comments here or email us at questions@theconservativetake.com. In our live stream this past week, we actually covered all of our questions there, and we will be doing that again in the near future. And lastly, because of the Mike Tyson situation, that fight is being delayed. We will hold off on that particular podcast as well, if not redo it as we get closer to the actual event. With that being said, everybody, I hope you enjoy part 2 of the Bubba Wallace disaster.
As much as some people may want to make you believe, not everything is about race.
What?
Yeah, you heard me, and I'll repeat it for everybody that did not hear what I just said. Not everything boils down to race. Sometimes things just boil down to who's better. Some things just boil down to talent. Some things just boil down to merit. And that's just the bottom line. There's no underlying currents. There's nothing sinister under the surface. It's a simple matter, in my opinion, more times than not, who's better on that day. And that's it. I think it takes away from sports and the sporting experience in general, when everything that happens between people of different races, where they don't agree or they have a disagreement, that it's made out to be racist. Sometimes people just jerk. Come on. I mean, it has nothing to do with race. Some people are just not likable. I don't care what color they are. It's not all about race. Let's stop doing this. When you have situations and disagreements, it's not racist. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with race. So, let's not be lazy in that regard and just call everything racism because people of different races disagree. We can disagree without things being racist. And you can mistake something for being racist. I'll give people the benefit of the doubt. They may think, well, wow, that was offensive. And I could be like, well, don't worry. I wasn't offended. It's okay. So, Bubba Wallace, I think, is a representation of things that are great about sports and things that are not so great about sports. And I think the not so great part has to do with outside forces that try to make something into what it's not, especially when it comes to race. So and it's hard for me to say this, but I wish Bubba the best of luck with the rest of his career. I'm not going to pull for him. But I want him to have a healthy, long career and focus on driving, and getting results, and stop getting all caught up in the race part of things, because it's just not there. NASCAR fans loved him before all this stuff started. So that doesn't have to do with race at all. So to me, if he cares about because during one of the rain delays, he was out on the track, tossing the football back and forth with some young fans. They appear to be like 10 and under, that sort of thing. And I'm sure that kid thought, well, this is the neatest thing of my life. I got to toss the football around with Bubba Wallace, and he's a Cup driver, and this, that, and the other thing. That meant a lot to that kid, I'm sure. So why not move yourself in that direction? Why not make a difference to some of these kids that, may not grow up to be a race car driver or a football player, just whatever. And that's a once in a lifetime moment for them. Why not be that guy? You don't have to be this angry, bitter, black guy that's, it's him against the world, and he's got a chip on his shoulder, and, he just thinks that everybody's against him. Come on. That kind of attitude just eats away at you after a while. That's a heavy weight to carry, and he doesn't have to carry it. You don't have to represent any particular group or any type of group of people that has an ulterior motive or just whatever. You don't have to speak for anybody but yourself. So, concentrate on being the best driver you can be. Be kind. There are a lot of people that I'm sure still pull for you. I'm not one of them, but you still have your fans. Be to a point where, as your career, moves forward, and who knows how long his career lasts, stop and smell the roses, appreciate, be thankful for the opportunities you've gotten, and make the most of it. But why do you want to, go around being disliked and hated? It doesn't have to be that way. And again, your results aren't backing up all this talking and bravado you're doing. Just kind of tone it down. Let your driving do the talking, not your mouth, because, your mouth can't back up what you've done so far. So, Bubba could have been, I think he could still be that over time. A really, really feel good story. And, I just think it's squandered opportunities to be that and to make the most of his opportunity, because it's just like any other pro sport. Only a very small number make it to that level. Appreciate the fraternity you're in, make the most of it, respect your fellow drivers, respect the fans, respect your owner, who, by the way, he demands excellence, and he has a right to. He's Michael Jordan. So go out and make your boss happy, win some races, make the most out of your career, enjoy it. Life's too short. And, just think through some of the things you say before you say them, and just think, is this really worth it? I would argue no, but I think he'll win some more races in his career. Will he be considered one of the all-time greats? Nah, not from an ability and results perspective. But can he be regarded as, one of the top drivers in his era? Maybe top 15 or 20 drivers over the past, 10, 15, 20 years? Maybe. He's got a shot at that. But he needs to focus on doing the work and getting the work done, and not getting so tied up in all this other stuff. And a lot of this stuff is just things that he brings upon himself. Like, everybody's out to get me. No, you're running from something that's not chasing you. And I can't take credit for that line. A good friend of mine mentioned that to me. I think his boss had said that to one of his coworkers, as far as worrying about something that's not there. You're running for something that's not chasing you. And I think that's what Bubba's doing at this point. And it's a shame because it takes away from what he does on the track. And he's running up front now, and they're talking about him not because, he's some kind of victim. They're talking about him because, he's driving fast race cars and he's running up front more times than not. That's why they're talking about him, and that's why they should be talking about him, and that's why you and I should be talking about him. But
not in this program,
but in a perfect world.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We can talk about him, but we talk about him for other, unfortunate reasons. But that is my view of Bubba Wallace. I think just potential there, and he could be much better, not just from a driver perspective, but he could just be a much better person. It's like be one of the faces of the sport. Don't just be a face that they just stick in a graphic just because, you're black and they're pushing you, not because you've won championships. Be the face of the sport, not only for your performance, but for, you being a good guy and trying to promote NASCAR, not just for, young black kids or whatever, but for all kids. Inspire everybody, be that kind of guy. That is my hope for him.
I think what I can do, I can add. By the way, that was a really good assessment. Probably the best one you'll probably find on the internet right now.
Thank you.
Where he just spoke there. He covered all the bases, and I'm not going to even touch any of what you said because it's fantastic. I'm going to give a different perspective. I have a little bit of a deck here that I'm going to show. So this is the picture of him, I guess, right after they put the Black Lives Matter sponsorship, I'm assuming. And so then this article comes up on Deadline. This is what the woke left does. Push out these narratives, to push all this agenda stuff. It says NASCAR's Bubba Wallace booed, crashes as Confederate flags fly in and around racetrack. Now, in journalism, this is called slanted journalism. Now, we're looking at July 17th, 2020. What happened 1 month prior to, actually 2 months prior to that? George Floyd happened back in May of that year. And so this whole era in COVID's going on, the world is upside down. And so they're spinning it as if, the race is South, the race is South. But the fact of the matter is, this is probably why they weren't clapping. Look at this. This is a NASCAR race of all places. They're patriots. They're holding their hands on their heart. Every one of them. He's not, and has a Marxist, anti-American, anti-God propaganda jersey on his shirt, and being very disrespectful, in my opinion. And I would submit that's why they were booing. And I'm going to get more into that in a second here in terms of why I got to go political here. Only because the South, there was a situation where leading up from slavery, which was a Democrat-controlled area, which was a slave-holding territory in our country, they were all controlled by Democrats. Now, at some point in time, that changed. And there's a book out there, I'll leave a link in this description of the podcast and the YouTube channel, which basically talks about how as the South became more Republican, it became less racist. And that is something that's been documented throughout. If you look at Nixon's campaign, when he ran in the South, he didn't run in the deep South within Alabamas and the Mississippis, the area. He ran in the Sun Belt, which is down more toward the Panhandle of Florida on out west. He won those areas almost unanimously. And so there's a reason for that. And so what I would submit, under the great Wendell Scott, he was dealing in an environment like that. Prior to that, you had Republicans in their Southern strategy were trying their best to try to wrestle away the Democrat vote from the white races, essentially, and let them know that they should go into the Republican Party because we are a newfangled party with new ideas. We are against the Soviet Union because at the time the Cold War was going on. We're for upper mobility, and we're for jobs. And because, think about it, back then, they were worried about Russia launching missiles into America. So the priority in voters became not necessarily about busing and immigration and Black people coming into our kitchens and our areas, but are we going to be able to survive a nuclear fallout attack because we're in the middle of a Cold War? So the culture changed. The Republican Party got a foothold in the South, and then because basically Jimmy Carter basically didn't do anything, and Reagan came in and was able to do that through his strategy, prefaced by Buchanan and Nixon's strategy prior to that, that all changed. And so now we're seeing Bubba Wallace's South is a lot different now, where they can't applaud a Black man winning a race. They can have a diversity hire program where you have Kyle Lawson and this gentleman, Bubba Wallace, become stars, essentially. And so that happens. But then you have this happen, too, in terms of a political side. You also have an economic side and a narrative side when you talk about something called the ESG. And that is a environmental, social, and government score, which basically is a oligarchy of banks and financial institutions who are imposing their will on companies, saying if you don't have a high enough ESG score, meaning if you don't have enough DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or if you're not good on society in terms of the environment, then we're going to dox you, and not dox you, but dock your pay or your sponsorships, so you won't have the money to move forward. And it's almost like a strong arm type of tactic that's happening. And so during that time in July and even a little bit to today, ESG scores became paramount. So many companies were just trying to do woke, so they wouldn't get doxed on the ESG scores. And so all that came to play, and Bubba Wallace took advantage of all of that. You said that he basically was like, hey, I'm in my last year of my contract, so what can I do? Colin Kaepernick. Justice Smollett. And many other grifters out there who want to take advantage because they know people are sensitive of the topic of race. And so that means they're going to be able to use that and split that for their own benefit because it's too easy. McDonald's comes in, all these sponsorships come in, and now he's getting money. And now he's able to win races because he has that backing. He leaves petty and goes over to, I guess, Jordan, you said. Now he's able to do more stuff. And now he's cocky. And he's not going to be popular until he can come back and do that. And on top of all that, like you said, Greg, really eloquently, the fact that there was no racism to begin with is quantifiable. A year before, that pool knot was there in the same garage, and he was not there yet. So my thing by him he took advantage of it. It's one thing to be upset that it happened and, be upset that he thought it happened, but then he took advantage of what happened after the fact. FBI said, no, it's not. He kept going with it. And I have a note here saying, basically, that's my story. I'm sticking with it. This is what basically Justice Smollett said. Oh, that story really did happen. He's trying to gaslight us, even though we all know the opposite. You mentioned about prejudice and racism. I challenge anyone to ever say or even document when they've ever met a real racist. I don't think they maybe exist, but they are so rare, it's ridiculous. Now, there's tons of people who are maybe culturally insensitive, jerks, just don't know any better, or what people would say would be a triggering mechanism, or they could say something where you're using words in a way that's abusive because you don't know your sensibilities of interpretation of certain things. But that's not racism. That's just differences in culture and other things. So I would say that as well. And lastly, I would say this, Greg, I have a picture for you that I want to show you. You say Richard Petty is your guy?
Yep, he sure is.
Well, check this out.
Oh, that's cool.
That's me and Richard Petty at his house. I think that's probably 2009-ish, somewhere in there. Yeah. It was a quick thing, but that's my take, Greg. I think you did a fantastic job. I try to get some cultural, political aspect in there as well, because the whole thing about the Confederate flags waving, that kind of irritated me because they're just trying to paint a narrative. It's 2 months after George Floyd. And so it's just that who knows what it is. It's probably ESG. Maybe it's just ignorance. Maybe it's just liberalness or wokeism that's trying to get clicks and all that stuff that we've seen before. I can go into that, but I'm not. But with that, Greg, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to let you close out. And then with that, I'll come back and we will say goodbye on the show. I hope this is a good record for everybody, because I think Greg did an excellent job of pointing everything out about this guy. I'll be sure to actually index all the points here. That way, after the fact, you can come back on YouTube only, really, because YouTube only allows us to do the indexing. That way you can come in and see what he talks about and jump to it directly in case you need to reference it later. So, Greg, close us out.
All right. So thank you. Discussing Bubba Wallace, it's hard not to get into all kinds of different areas of what's going on in society today. You really can't talk about Bubba Wallace just as a race car driver. I'd like for us to get to a point where we can. But like I said before, there are certain people, certain groups with certain agendas that don't want to allow us to just talk about him as a race car driver, that we have to talk about this from some sort of racial angle and some sort of conflict at a racial level. You know, are there going to be people that are going to be boneheads about that sort of thing? Sure. But to me, at the end of the day, they're not going to win. We're way beyond that as a nation. In spite of what anybody says, racism is not part of our DNA. That's absolutely 100% not true in my mind. So, you know, whether you go to the race or go to a ball game or just whatever it is, enjoy what's going on the field or on the track or on the court, and, not get caught up into, oh, well, that's offensive, or this is racist, or that's racist. Enjoy, the sport or the event or just whatever it is for what it is. And again, not all of the conflicts we find in our everyday lives has anything to do with race. Most of them have nothing to do with race. Bubba Wallace and, other people before him or after him that achieve a certain level of success in sports, they should be celebrated for that and not looked at as, oh, well, we need to talk about him because of what's going on in society. Why? We're talking about sports. We're talking about entertainment or whatever it is we're talking about. Now, I don't want to diminish, and I hope nobody misunderstands me. Back in the 50s and 60s, when certain high-profile athletes were taking a stand and standing up for civil rights and standing up, for Black people to have equal rights and be treated equally, that's a whole different thing. At that point, that was needed and that was warranted because we lived in a different time where there was legitimate racism. And these guys helped bring attention to that and, fought for a change. But today, there's not a need for that at that level. Are there problems? Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say they're not problems. But to me, to say that racism is the number one problem of America, I'm like, I just don't see it. And I think that we shouldn't allow ourselves as a society and as a nation to be dragged down by that kind of talk. If you wonder about that sort of thing, or if you really want to know if something is offensive to somebody or just whatever it is, if that's a big deal to you, ask them. Because I dare say a lot of these things that people get upset about as far as being offensive or racist are not offensive or racist to that particular group of people. I don't need for somebody to tell me when I should be offended. I'm a grown man, and I think I know when I've been offended or what offends me. So leave that up to the individual people. for them to decide what offends them. But to try to broad brush a whole, an entire section of people from a certain part of the country or fans of a particular sport, to characterize them as being racist because of what happened 40, 50 years ago is unfair. And it's unfair in every walk of life, not just this. So Bubba Wallace, to me, he has the potential to be a pretty decent driver. He's 30 years old, which is not super young, but it's not super old either. I mean, to me, he's probably got, if he wants to continue to drive, he's probably got 10, 12 more years in him, and he can win more races and achieve more successes. We need to focus on that, but, unfortunately things happen where it presents an opportunity for people to take advantage of things and turn it into something that it isn't, for their own personal reasons and for their own agendas. And that's very unfortunate. So I would encourage anybody that's listening to us, or anybody that, is a fan of NASCAR or any sport in general, I would say when tough things happen, when tough conversations happen, be willing to listen, be willing to hear out, the other side of it, and be at a place where you can agree to disagree. It seems like we can't do that anymore. Everything has to wind up in a conflict because we have a difference of opinion. And, that's sad too. And I think that kind of wraps up what we see when it comes to Bubba Wallace. And, why can't we just say what it is? Why does it have to be escalated into some sort of racial thing? I think basically, we don't give each other credit from an intellectual perspective when we do that. We fall victim to the lowest common denominator when we do that. So, let's think a little bit more of each other, and let's be intelligent and compassionate people, and let's think beyond just the very easy to reach argument. Oh, well, that's racist. No, it's not. Let's look at what it is. And if it's a true problem, let's see what we can do to fix it. But to just dismiss any conflict involving people of different races as racist, it's regrettable, and it's just, we're better people than that. And I feel very strongly about that. So, again, best of luck to Bubba. I hope you have a long and successful career, whatever success looks like. To me, he's already been successful because, like I said, a lot of guys that run in the Cup Series, a lot of them don't win any races. He won 2, and that's certainly an achievement. And I hope he wins, more races. Again, I won't be pulling for him because he's not my guy, and I've mentioned reason before as to why I don't cheer for him. But I do wish him success, and I hope he can find, and I'm being very serious here, I hope he can find a peaceful place where he can exist and be okay with who he is and what's really going on in his career. I read someplace where he's dealt with depression, and that's a serious thing to deal with that most people just don't understand. It's a very dark, bad, lonely place to be, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So if he's dealing with depression, I'll pray for him. Excuse me. I'll pray for him and pray that that's something that he can, better deal with and manage. But from a purely sport perspective, I wish him the best of luck, not just in NASCAR, but in life. And again, we're all human beings, and we need to try to be kind to one another. But to turn something like we just talked about into something that's just, ugly and mean, and it doesn't need to be, I'm like, why do we do that? So I stress this to everybody, let's be a lot more careful about who we call racist, what we call racist, because not only is that hurtful, especially if it's not true, but, we're just better than that as a society. So my hat's off to you, Bubba. You've accomplished a lot, but, try to be a little bit more thoughtful about what you say and what you do. And I think, you'll have a lot more fruitful career as a result.
Well said, Greg. Well said. In fact, we'll probably break this up into 2 episodes only because I think it'd be better to digest. We covered so much. But I'm going to go on. I was going to give you the last word, but I actually had one more slide I was going to talk about. But I just looked at this real quickly off the cuff. These are these are actually several bills. Confederate currency, actual Confederate, not reproductions, actual Confederate currency. One's from Richmond. Every state pretty much had its own. They couldn't agree, so they all had their own currency. This is all this from Richmond, Virginia, essentially. $2 bill, whatever. So that's an interesting history. Right here, you'll see a picture of 2 gentlemen, W.E.B. Du Bois, and to the right is Booker T. Washington. Contemporary gentlemen, both Black, and had 2 diametrically opposed worldviews. And essentially, all you need to know is essentially a concept called free labor. And free labor is the concept which basically came from the Puritans over from England, essentially meaning that the notion is if you have a healthy body, then that healthy body can do a service or create a widget or a good or something, and that widget or good or service can be sold to someone for their benefit in exchange for capital. That capital can be used to build more capital. You repeat, and ultimately you can change yourself, your station in life from wherever you are, whether it be in the lower class to the middle class and so on. That is the concept of free labor. It meant you had to work. And Booker T. Washington was really the guy who really took that to heart. And Abraham Lincoln did as well. And many, many people in the past did. That's that mindset. Booker T. Washington had a book called Up From Slavery. He himself was born into slavery and became a very successful man. Du Bois, his philosophy was activism. He was one of the first presidents of Harvard. He went to Harvard and he was very scholarly and this and that. He embraced socialism and it goes downhill from there. So I would say, it's about what you said, Greg, earlier. It's about merit. It's about what you do. That's why people are going to like you, is because of your merits, is what MLK said. Not the color of your skin, but the content of your character. And ultimately, it's basically what you do that sets you apart versus activism to kind of con your way into wealth and prosperity. So.
All right. Well, yeah, this has certainly been a topic of discussion that, prompted, different angles as far as, talking about, Bubba Wallace, the race car driver, Bubba Wallace, the man, and on and on. So it's certainly not a simple topic, but I think, we certainly did the best we could to cover all aspects of it. And it's certainly been interesting. So hopefully our listeners will think it's interesting as well. And I hope we inspire some sort of, thought about this, maybe conversations about this. But, I think if you as an individual, have a different opinion about this than us, then, just try to see our viewpoint. And, I welcome other people's viewpoints on this. I'm sure there are people that probably didn't agree with a word I said about Bubba. I mean, that's probably like, yeah,
Me, definitely. Yeah.
But, I'm open to understanding, or trying to understand, why you feel differently, or if you're upset with what I said about Bubba Wallace. I mean, on this show, I know we're going to make somebody mad with what we say. But to me, whether we make you mad or not, hopefully we can at least make you think. And after you think about it, if you still disagree with me, great. I mean, that's fine. I mean, we're all going to differ on opinions at some level. So that's perfectly fine. But hopefully we can provoke some thought on this show. And sometimes it's lighthearted and sometimes it's a little bit more serious. But even when it gets serious, hopefully people will be respectful enough and thoughtful enough to, consider, other people's opinions about this sort of thing, especially this sort of thing. And at the end of the day, again, if you don't agree, let's agree to disagree. Let's still remain friends and let's just move on. Because there's a whole lot of other stuff we'll be talking about. We're not going to talk about Bubba every week. Probably could, but we're not.
No.
So let's agree to disagree, shake hands, and move on to the next.
All right, so that's it for this particular episode 14 of the Old Glory Games podcast. My name is Kyle. On behalf of Greg, we wish you well. And lastly, if you want to just give us your questions, do so by emailing us at questions@theconservativetake.com, and we will cover those in a future video, probably a live stream video, as we've done in the past. All right, I will see you in the next one.